Hello and welcome to episode 3 of DataCube's free online training course. In this week's episode, we're again talking about the importance of chart selection. This is part 2. Part 1 was last week's episode, the importance of chart selection again, where we spoke about the most commonly used standard visuals that PowerBI has to offer. These were mainly looking at charts for comparative analysis and charts for showing change over time. If you haven't already seen this episode, please go and check it out in our channel. So in part 2 today, we're going to be speaking about the rest of the visuals available to you in Microsoft Power BI. So we're going to touch on again some more comparative analysis by looking at things like pie charts, donut charts, tree maps, but we're also going to be able to look at the best way of displaying those headline numbers, KPIs. I also want to speak about spatial capabilities that Power BI has and its standard visuals, so we're going to be looking at mapping, and then I'm going to touch on the rest of the visuals that are left that we didn't touch on last week. So let's start this week's episode by starting off where we left off last week. So this was the ribbon chart we got to last week. So you'll see at the bottom I've got some more sheet tabs this week, which obviously made by pressing the plus. You can always delete those or duplicate them or rename them if you right click on any of those. So last week we got up to ribbon charts, so this week I'm going to speak about the rest of the standard visuals in Power BI. I'm going to start off with this little cluster of 3 here, which is 1 pie chart, 2 donut chart, and 3 tree map. Now I've already pre-made a few, which you can see here. And that just really displays how they are just really good for additional comparisons. But I'm going to take you through how I made those now. So I'm going to make a new sheet. Just going to drag it down next to comparison so it's together. And the first one we spoke about was pie chart. So all I have to do first is press the pie chart. I'm going to pop this in the middle. You might have noticed these handy red dotted lines that come up, which allow you to sort of snap it into the right place. So go to my grocery shop database, not database at all, table, and you'll notice there's some additional fields in here which I'll get onto later. I made these for some of the charts that we're going to speak about later. So what I want to do is put whatever I want to split the pie chart in legends. So at the moment I'm interested in the different products, so they can go in the legend. Here they are. And I care about value, so how much income did each of those different products give me, so I'm going to put that in values. And here you can see it split my pie chart up into all the different segments. Now the first thing you'll notice is that it looks like a mess, and this is the number one thing you need to be careful with a pie chart. A lot of analysts will tell you never use a pie chart are useless, but they do serve a good purpose. They show a proportion of a whole. So here we can see all our products which are adding up to our total value. So perfect proportion of a whole, it represents 100% of our value. But there should be a limitation on how many portions of your pie you ever use. So here we have all our products, which is 20, which is too many in my personal opinion. So we need to filter these down. Now we could use, this is just a little tip I thought I'd throw in, so we could make a new slicer, not like that, by pressing in a blank space, pressing slicer, we could put our products in, and then filter that down to the ones we're interested in. Something I want to show you is that if we go to our last week, we know we've already made this product slicer and we spent time formatting it, so it was a drop down. We've already selected the ones we want. So actually if you copy that, Control C, press on blank space on your new page, V, you'll see that will already come up and has already filtered to what we had before, and it's in the same format. You get this pop-up saying sync visuals, which basically means it knows there's a slicer that's using the same filter or filtering by the same value, so in this case product, on a different sheet, and it wants to know whether if you change one of them, do you want it to change the other one as well. So I think great, it's exactly what I want. I want to sync those slicers And so now if I were to change this one, so add butternut squash, and I go back to my other one, you'll see that butternut squash has also been added to this slicer. So that's really handy. Anyway, let's take away butternut squash again. We've got back to our old 5 products that we know now from the last couple of sessions. And now this pie chart, it makes more sense. We've only got our 5 slices, so we can really see how they add up to the total a bit better. Now it is a bit cramped, so something that I'd recommend doing is to have a play with the visualization formatting. There's quite a lot you can do on a pie chart. One is I'm going to take away the title, gives us a bit more space, and on the legend you can play around by moving that, whether you want that along the top, bit like we had before, but then we have to scroll to see what the different colours are. You can have it top centered, you can have it right centered, which will be over there, that's left centered. You go with the default here, which is right center. Next, data colors. These are, you can choose those. Data labels. Now this is something that's really interesting. So it already has some preset data label options for you here. So you can have a play around with these. Category will just tell you what the product is, because that's what we put in the legend. You can have just the data value, so that's the actual, that's the income split by product. The percent of total, which is good for a pie chart because you want it all be parts of a whole, so you want all these to add up to 100%, so that's a good one to have. You can add multiple, which is shown with these commas here. The problem with that is it gets a bit messy. You can even put all details, but you can see here it's all just been cut off. That's something that PowerBI is not great at, is being able to sort of adjust the size of these things. So if you wanted a nice small pie, it doesn't allow much space for the labels. You can make the text size smaller, but that's not always something you want to do. So if you want nice big text, you can see everything's cut off. So obviously you could make your chart bigger, but that's not always ideal. So often I actually just turn these off completely. And down in the tooltips, you can see that this is switched on, which means if I hover over, I can actually see all the information I need to see just by hovering. So that's something that's quite useful. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller so it looks a bit nicer, and we can fit more on this page, and pop it in the middle there. So here we have a pie chart. We can see which colours mean which product, and I can just hover over if I really want to know the exact numbers. So next up, I'm going to speak about something very similar to a pie, but it's called a donut. So I'm going to copy my pie chart, paste it below it, so we can see what the differences are. And whilst it's selected, I'm going to click on donut, and you can see the middle has been taken out, so the pie is left with the crust, or it's not a filled donut, but it's a ring donut, if you like. So similarly, we have the same options. So I could put my data labels back on, I could change that to just the values, I can turn those off. My tooltips are on, so if I hover, you can see that. Now traditionally in a donut you can add multiple layers, so you'd be able to drill down and see different levels. So I could have cells along the top and values within the middle, so it's like a pie within a pie, if you like. But like this, I think aesthetically it looks a lot nicer. You can also use this space in the middle. So traditionally, if these were a bit bigger, I might have put my legend actually within the pie itself, which gives us a bit more white space around. The other thing that I've seen people do, and I've done it myself in the past, is use an icon to represent what that means. So if we went back to this, I've just got a little icon here of a shopping trolley to represent my grocery shop, and you can just sort of stick that in the middle there, like that. And how I did that was to, I just googled a shopping trolley PNG. PNG is a file type, which is a backgroundless image, and then I clicked on insert here, insert image, and then just selected it from my the space where I knew it was saved. Now, similar to these, we can make a Treemap. So I didn't click my shopping trolley. Put that over here. So if I copy my pie chart, I'll put that into the middle, and the next one on the list is this Treemap, and it's a similar sort of thing. So it shows a proportion of a whole, and allows us to see. So this whole space is 100%, and it shows the proportion of each of these. And again, I can play around with these options. So I could put data labels on here because I know I've got a lot more space. So here we can see the actual values, even though my tooltip's turned on. So if I hover, I will get the same value, although this is formatted differently. You can change the formatting in here. So units auto, I could have none, which is the full number. I could have it in thousands, so it puts the K in. Millions, it will obviously show 0 because we're not even close, or none at all. The next set of visuals are ones that I've sort of clustered into sort of headline numbers, KPIs, and they're the ones that you can see here. These are ones I made earlier today as sort of preset. So up here we've got the one that's just called KPI card. We've got a gauge, and then we've got the multi-row card. I'll also speak about the just card as well as the multi-row card. So these are great for just displaying headline numbers and showing off your KPIs. So I'm going to take those in turn and speak about them now. Now the most simple one of those is the card, and that just allows you to just display the value of any of your fields. So for example, let's do value, pop that in there, and this is automatically a sum. So a sum of all our value across all our products, across all time, so across that whole week. You could do an average, you could do the minimum value, so the cheapest product there, the maximum, a count of different values, count distinct. So if we stick with sum for now, we can see over the course of that week made £10,500, and these can be edited quite a lot. So for example, you can put a title on it, so total value, for example. You could adjust that, make it bigger. As a preset, the data label is that value there. So 10.49. You can change how that's displayed. That's the category label, so you can turn where it says value there, which is the name of the field that we've entered. If you wanted to rename that, you can click on that and press rename. If you didn't want it to say value, but you wanted the field to be kept as value. And then in general, you can obviously position where you want that, but it's a little bit limited in terms of your functionality. So in general there, if I wanted to make the title closer to the actual value number, I could just change that to, let's say, 100, and then the visual is much smaller and it looks a bit better there. If I wanted to have multiple of these, I can change that from a card to a multi-row card. So it's now put that as a single line, but what I could do is I could add in, say, split by product into there. Where is it? And then if I make this a bit bigger, you can see it's now split that by product and the value. If I make it wider, like that, there we go. So that's the card and the multi-row card. The multi-row just allows you to sort of split it by more than one measure. or more than one field. So I could also put sales in there, so I know spinach, we sold that many, 1159, and the value of that was 1159, because they're £1 each. So I'm going to delete that, and the next thing I want to talk about is the gauge. Now the gauge allows us to see where we are against, say, targets. This could be used quite well with forecasting against a budget, or looking back and comparing, say, this week's final compared to last week's final. So you might have a field in here which would say this week's sales, and you might have last week's sales, and you might have this week's target sales, and it allows you to see where you are against your targets, against last year, or whatever you want to compare it against. So if I'm interested in looking at value, I can pop that in there. And we know our total value here is 10.49. So you can add in a target value. So here I've created a field. I'm going to stop that because I don't know what. The next chart on the list is the gauge chart, which is another good way of displaying your KPIs, your headline figures. This one's really good for looking at comparing values. So say for example you wanted to compare, in this example, you're grocery shopping, you're a manager of a grocery store, and you want to compare your final sales this week compared to your final sales from last week. You can see how they did. You could have a field in your data set which would be sales this week, sales last week. You can compare those against each other. It's also good for forecasting, so you might want to compare against a budget. So if I said I wanted to have budgeted in £1,000 this week, and then you can compare that against your actual values. So for this exercise, for this gauge chart, I've created a few additional measures which you can see here, which I can slot into these. So my current value, I'm going to put in value. So it's saying at the moment I've sold 50, let's call this 50 packets of spinach. And my target value, I can put in target. My target value this week is 75. Now, what day is it today? It's only Tuesday, so we're looking good on our target, and our maximum value here is 100, and our minimum value here is 0. Now I've used all of these, even though the preset was 0 and 100, because if your current value changes, and just say this was 90, or it went over 100, but you only want to cap it at 100, it would change the values that it shows there. So you can create extra measures to help you with that. So I'll just show you how I made these. So minimum value was just min value equals 0, so that's what I put to show here. Max value similarly equals 100. My target value was 75. My current value was 50. But if this was coming through your database, your target value, you might have something that enables that to pull through, which is your live data or your latest data cut, comparing to, say, last week or budgeted, like I said before. Now there's quite a lot of different formatting options on this chart. So for example with colours, like with most of them, data labels, so we can turn those off. I quite like doing that because we don't actually need to see the 0 and 100 there. We know that our target is 75 and we're at 50, so you can compare where we are live, which is this blue bar, to our target. So you can take off the target number, that's quite important. The call out value, that's also important because that's what we're comparing with. You can take on or off title, or you could custom that. And then of course the tooltips are on, so if I hover it over, we can see our target value is 75, our current value is 50. Next on the list is the KPI chart. So if I click on the KPI chart, probably error, yep. So what I want to be looking at here is, I'll make one quickly first. So my indicator here that I want to look at is my sales. And I want to look at this over time, so I'm going to use my date field. Now we can see this is our sales chart as we've seen before. Looks a bit like an area chart, and we know we've made 707 sales. Now the good thing about the KPI is you can have it as a target. So I've set here a KPI target of 500. So a bit like for the gauge chart, I just made a little measure which says KPI target 500 equals 500. Now, this is a bit like the gauge, it's comparing. So we know we've made 707 sales, our goal was 500. So we have ticked that, it's gone green, and we can see how much over the goal it has gone. Now, if our target was actually 1,000, then it would say, exclamation mark, it's gone red, we're 29.3% off our target. Now, if our target was 1,000, but that was a bad thing, so for example, if this was a sports scenario, and this was, I don't know, goals, but you didn't want to be conceding anything, then you want to be under that target. So you can do that within these. So I think it's under goals. So direction, distance direction, increase is positive, decrease is positive. So you can change that on the plus minus. But direction here on the color coding, high is good, low is good. So in that sport example, we didn't want to concede lots of goals, so we're under our conceding target, so we still got 29.3% there. But most of the time you'll probably be high is good. So our goal is to sell 1,000 items and we're at 707, so it's gone red. And you can change that. So if we have to play around with this and our target was actually 707, if I change that, so target 707 equals 707, and you'll see it's gone green, probably because it's rounded up. Or if I, for example, do put sales in the target, then you'll see we've got that mid color as well now. So if you're close, you can set the distance, I think, for the color coding, but there's a neutral color which is yellow. So if you're close to that, you can put that in. Goals here, so you can change the formatting on that. Get rid of the goals, indicator, change the units, where it's displayed. I think it looks quite good in the middle. So I did a couple on the other sheet here, just to show a red and a green one, although now I've changed that. So if I put that back to 1,000 as our goal, oops, equals 1,000, then it will go red again. So that's sort of roundup of good visuals to show off KPIs. So we had our card, our multi-row card, our gauge, and our KPI chart. Next up are two charts, the funnel chart and the KPI chart. Now for these two visuals I've created additional data sets because they didn't work so well with the grocery shop one that we had. So I've called this funnel data, and this one is about grocery email subscribers. So let's start with the top one, which is a funnel chart. Now this is all about flow. Quite a lot of people use Sankey diagrams. We'll come to those later when we talk about custom visuals, but as a standard visual, the flow chart is really good for this. So I have a data set here, which I'll show you. So it's really simple. So what I did was how many people are entering the shop, how many people browsed items, how many people put something in their basket and then went on to purchase. So it's sort of like a flow through the shop. And you can see where people are dropping out, because if everyone did all of these actions, these value would always be 100. So 100 people entered, 100 people browsed, 100 people put something in the basket, 100 people purchased. But we know that of people entered, only half actually purchased something. So to display that, you can use one of these funnel charts, which is shown over here. So I've got my categories in the group, and my categories are the actions, so enter, browse, basket, purchase, and the values are the amount of people that did each of those actions. So you can see here sort of the flow of the data as people sort of dropped off, and you can see how many people did that. So funnel is really good for showing that. Another great one for showing flow is a waterfall chart. Now these have been around forever, but it does come as a Power BI standard visual, this waterfall chart here. So again, a bit like with the funnel chart, I made an additional data set for this, just to show how this works. So I'll show that to you now, and that is this one. So my grocery shop's doing really well, and I've set up an email program, and I've got 4 years worth of data here, aggregated up into how many subscribers and how many unsubscribers I've had each year. Now, first year I managed to get 100,000 people to subscribe, but my emails were really bad, and 90% of those people, so 900 people, actually unsubscribed. The second year my marketing was even better, and about half of those people dropped off. The third year, 2,500, better ratio, dropped off, still 1,000, and then my fourth year had it pretty well nailed. 3,000 people signed up and only 500 people unsubscribed. But I want to see this as a sort of build up, and so how many subscribers I had at the end and how many people had dropped off. So waterfall chart's really good for that, because I can see here I had 1,000 people sign up, and then it dropped all the way down as 900 people left. So I'm at 100 now, but all these people signed up, which was 2,000, and then 1,000 drops off, so I'm now just over 1,000, and then you can see how it sort of builds up and falls back down, builds up and falls back down. So at the end of year 4, I had 3,000 new subscribers, 500 of them dropped off, but that gave me a total at the end of 4 years, 5,100 still sort of active subscribers to my grocery email newsletter, which would be great. So that's a really good way of showing that. So it's quite a simple one to set up. So my categories and my subscriber events, you've got to make sure your data is in the right format here, and make sure that the ordering of these is right. So this one is done on year, it's alphabetical, so year 1 comes first, subscribers before unsubscribers, and then we've got the year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, sorry, not year 5, total. It's a really good way of showing that sort of build up, degradation. It's good for if you have like an active base of people that sign up to your organization, and you can see who's active, or if this was consent, you can see who you could give consent, who new people who sign up, who you lost consent to, a bit like this with the emails. Next up is the scatter chart. That can be found right in the middle of your visualization pane here. And it's great for displaying your values, but being able to manipulate that data a bit more by, say, not just changing the color by legend, but you can also do things like adding size. So let's start really simple. You'll see I've got my slicer up here again, which is synced up with the other slicers. So it's just showing my 5 products I'm interested in. Now, here's my sales data again by my week, so we can see for each value. And then I've made a big version over here, which is the same chart, but instead I've split that by product. Now, not only have I split that by product, so each color is a different product, but the size of each of the scatter bubbles, should we call circles, is sized by the value of that product. Now the axis is sales, so number of sales, but the size of that is by value. So this one in the middle here, the kidney beans, is quite a good example, because although we've had lots of sales, the circle is relatively small, so the size of that bubble stays quite small. And a good comparison is to look at the blue and the orange here of the beetroot and the broccoli. Now, sales have tracked relatively similarly. The beetroot, which the point will be right in the center of that circle, has produced a few more sales. So for example on the 6th it was 115, whereas the broccoli was 87. But you can see the value of that product, which is the size of the bubble, indicates that you're actually getting a lot more money. So you're driving slightly more sales, but the income you're getting off the back of that is a lot greater. Now spinach, we know, is our most popular item in the grocery shop, so it's at the top here, and it's also really valuable, so it has a really large circle. So this is a great one for showing multiple how multiple dimensions within your data set interact with each other. Next up, we're going to be speaking about spatial analytics, which in PowerBI's case really means mapping. These training episodes are all about trying to train you up to be as good as you can be, and also being really honest about the software that we use. I think one of my heaviest criticisms of PowerBI is the mapping capabilities. Now, we have 3 different mapping options as standard visuals, and I think they're quite inferior to other softwares that I've used before. But I'm going to run you through them quickly and explain my thoughts on them and how to make some of these visuals. So the first one here is what's called map. Now, I've downloaded some freely available data from online, which basically is a very small data set. It looks at, I'll just get it up for you here. I think it was this one, so is it that one? Pop numbers. So it has an area code, so England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, UK, population, the share that population has, so as a proportion, and then what the increase on that has been as a number from the year before, and the percentage change. Quite a nice little data set, freely available online, just give it a little search. So the first thing I did here was take out UK, because that is for all of these measures. So the first one, as I said, is just called map, which looks like this. It did manage to work out that I just put that column 1, which is this sort of area or country, into location, and then I sized my bubbles on the increase in 2017. I could put population 2018 in there, and that will colour my dots differently. The problem with these mappings, it does heavily rely on latitude and longitude coordinates as an ideal scenario. You can also throw in here, where I've thrown in a country, it recognises that. You can also throw in what it calls a state or a province or an area code, but ideally it wants longitude and latitude coordinates. So you can change your colours, you can put category labels on, you can change the size of your bubbles, but the problem that we've got here is that if I had a bubble for each postcode area, you really can't tell what's, so for example this is population. If this was split into 100 different areas, each bubble, they will overlap so much that you wouldn't be able to really differentiate between any areas at all, because it's not a sort of area map. Now the next one is the area map, which is here. So I'd recommend this a lot more than it's called a field map actually. So I'd recommend this a lot more than using the bubbles. So it has identified in location where my different areas are, so I can now say colour those by different things. So for example here I've coloured by different countries, or I could get rid of that and put in population, and it allows me to see based on these colours which one is bigger, which one is smaller. The problem is here, under data colours, it just is manual entry. Other mapping tools allow you to use gradient of colours. So for example, you might use a hot-cold colour scheme, so red is lots of people, blue is very few people, but it doesn't allow you that option here. You can change your mapping style, so the maps themselves are okay, so you could have an aerial map, which looks quite nice. At least allows you to overlay some data on top of that, and it's quite accurate. It takes a bit of lag time sometimes when you move, sometimes the there we go, the poly shape has a bit of lag on it. But there's quite a lot of other things you can format. It's just limited on sort of colour, and then the insight you can sort of drive through that. The third mapping capability in Power BI that I want to talk about is the one that I've pre-made here, which is Arcgis integration with PowerBI, which is powered by a company called ESRI. They've been around for a very long time. They are the market leaders in GIS mapping, so geographical information systems. It's very expensive software, and this is their sort of integration with Power BI. Started using these probably 10 years ago in sort of earth science stuff that I was doing. So again, it has limitations, but also has a few benefits over the Microsoft packages which are using Bing Maps. So here I have a different data set, so I'm looking at different areas instead. So instead of country level, I've gone down to area level. So for example, you've got Daventry, which is now Coventry, Northampton, South Northampton. So we're at a sort of county area level. So I've split that, and it's recognised them, so that's quite good. The good thing about this map is it allows you to modify your bubbles with size and colour. So in my dataset I only had one measure, so I have used the same measure to both colour and size. So the bigger the bubble and the darker the red is the bigger the population change. So for example, if I use the tooltip and hover over, this Newham area is quite dark, quite big. But the darkest ones are probably here, Stratford-on-Avon, you can see 1.9, whereas the smaller, lighter bubbles, like this one here in Plymouth, 0.01. Now, I can't change how they look, that's the biggest problem. So you've got layers here, title, background, aspect ratio, general, border, visual headers, but I can't really change how these look. I can't change the colour, I can't change the size of bubbles. And similarly to our first map, the Bing one, just the one called Map, now I've got an example where there's lots and lots and lots of positions on the map, and where it's heavily clustered, like in London here, they all sit on one on top of the other. It's really hard to differentiate or try and draw any insight out of that. So where there's benefits in the area mapping, where we can actually see the different areas and they're not all going to be one on top of the other, you can't actually change these layers to be able to colour on some sort of scale, where at least on the GIS mapping we can have some sort of reference to scale, so we know that the light orange, the dark red, the darker the higher the change, and the same with the bubbles, but we can't actually edit that. So I think there's limitations to all three of the mapping functionalities that Power BI has here. However, it does give you an option, so if you want to do some sort of basic mapping, it can do that, but you're slightly limited in how far you can go with that. So I want to wrap this episode up by speaking about the visuals that I've missed out and why I've missed them out. So we've spoken about all our visuals, all the way down to sort of the bottom row here. And there's three that I've missed out. So one is called the R-script visual. Now we can drag a field in here and we can see that it brings up this little scripting portal. Now R is a programming language, and it allows the functionality of writing some R code in this box, allowing you to interact with your data. And similarly, there's a Python add-on, which is the Python visual, which does a similar thing as the R. So you can see the Python logo there, and it allows us to write Python if you know how to do that. So I've left those out because it really depends on whether you know any R or know any Python. And then the last two are quite good ones. One is the key influencer and one is the Q&A, but these are to be introduced later in the series, so don't worry, we will be talking about these. Also the Power BI apps, we'll touch on that later in the series briefly, but that's sort of a wrap on that episode. So I hope you really enjoyed. I hope that was informative and led on well from last week's episode. Make sure you tune in for next week as well. Like the video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out. Thank you very much. See you next week.